April 29th, 1945. Bavaria, Germany. The war is almost over. But here, in a field turned to mud by spring rain, one German soldier has never been more afraid. Werner Müller is on his knees. His uniform, once proud, once pressed, is now soaked and torn. His hands tremble, not from cold, but from terror. The kind that crawls up your spine when you realize history has reversed itself, because standing above him is a man Müller knows, an American, Captain Thomas Fitzgerald. 8 months ago, their positions were reversed. Müller held the keys to the camp gates. Fitzgerald was behind them, just a number. Prisoner 4,739, navigator of a B-24 shot down over France. Back then, Müller decided who lived well and who did not, who ate, who starved, who got medicine, and who died in the mud. Now, the roles are reversed. Now Müller is the one in the mud. And Fitzgerald, the man he mocked, the man he left to freezes holding a rifle. Rain drips from the barrel. The air between them feels carved from stone. Müller knows what happens next. He's heard the stories, revenge killings, executions on the spot, justice delivered with a single shot. And in that frozen silence, he closes his eyes, waiting for the sound of the trigger. But what happens next will not haunt Müller because of what Captain Thomas Fitzgerald does, but because of what he does not do. To understand that moment, to understand why an American soldier would spare the man who had once taken everything from him, we have to go back. 8 months earlier, Mossberg, Germany. August 1944. August 1944. The air over southern Germany is thick with dust and defeat. Thomas Fitzgerald, navigator of a B-24 called the Lucky Lady, is half-conscious when they drag him from the cattle car. He's lost 18 pounds in 2 weeks. His lips are cracked, his uniform stiff with dried blood. He can still hear the screams from that day, the day his plane came apart over France. Flak tore the wings to ribbons. He watched 3 friends die before their parachutes even opened. The rest were scattered across enemy countryside like broken feathers. The French resistance found him first. They hid him in a cellar, fed him bread and wine, whispered that help was coming. But before it could, the Gestapo arrived. 3 days of interrogation. No food, no water. Just the same question again and again until his mind blurred and his body gave up. When the train doors opened at Mossberg, sunlight hit him like a slap. And there, barking orders, limping slightly, cigarette dangling from his lip, stood the man who would define his captivity, Werner Müller, 27 years old, once a soldier at Kursk, now a guard. Too injured for combat, too angry for mercy. His left leg never healed right, his pride never healed at all. He looked at the new prisoners with open contempt. Schweine, he spat pigs. These were the Terrorflieger, the terror flyers, the propaganda warned him about. Men who dropped fire on Hamburg, on Dresden. Baby killers, they said. Not real men, not even human. Thomas shuffled forward through the line, trying to meet Müller's gaze, searching for any trace of humanity. He found none. Only eyes, dulled by years of hatred. The camp itself was worse than anything he'd imagined. Barracks built for 100 now held 800. Men slept in shifts. The smell, waste, sweat, sickness, rot seeped into the walls. The sound never stopped. Coughing, crying, boots on gravel. Food was a grey paste, ladled from buckets. Water came from a trough, shared with the dogs. Disease spread like smoke, dysentery, typhus, pneumonia. The weak were sent to rest barracks, where rest meant dying quietly out of sight. And through it all, Müller prowled. He wasn't the worst guard. There were sadists who beat prisoners bloody for sport, but he was the most consistent, cold, methodical. A man who believed cruelty was just another form of duty. He had rules. If your work details slowed down, you stood in the rain until you collapsed. If you spoke out of turn, no food. If you complained, the isolation box 6 feet by 6. No window, no light, no heat. Men came out of it hollowed, their minds scraped clean. Thomas learned quickly which guards to avoid. Müller topped the list. And yet, something in him refused to break. Even as his body shrank and his hope drained away, some quiet defiance stayed alive, a pilot's stubbornness, the belief that one day he'd see home again. But war has a way of testing every conviction, and soon that quiet defiance would meet the coldest winter Germany had seen in years, and the moment that would scar them both forever. December 1944, winter in Bavaria. The kind that doesn't just freeze, it punishes. The sky is grey steel. The wind cuts through the camp like a blade. Even the dogs refuse to bark anymore. Thomas Fitzgerald is on work detail, repairing a Grusso, section of barbed wire fence that's been torn loose by a storm. His gloves have holes. His fingers are blue. He's hammering a post into the ground when the metal slips from his numb hand and clatters onto the frozen mud. For one heartbeat, nothing happens. Then comes the voice. Dummkopf, Faule Amerikaner, idiot, lazy American. Müller's boots crunch through the snow as he limps toward him. He kicks the hammer away, sends it spinning across the ground, then snarls, "Stand up! Attention!" Thomas stands, slowly, his body's shaking. He knows what's coming. Everyone does. Punishment. Müller's kind of punishment. Minutes pass, then hours. The cold is a living thing, gnawing at his bones. First comes the shivering, then the numbness, then the stillness, the body's last trick to conserve heat before it gives up. Snow gathers on his shoulders, his vision swims. Somewhere, someone mutters for Müller to stop. A younger guard, Klaus, says something in German, voice trembling. Müller doesn't answer. He just lights a cigarette and smiles. Not the smile of rage or satisfaction, something emptier, the quiet, measured pleasure of control. The kind of smile Thomas will see in his nightmares for the rest of his life. 3 hours, then, mercifully, darkness. He collapses face first into the snow. The world fades to white. When he wakes, it's 4 days later. He's in the infirmary, a drafty shack with no heat and a single blanket. A German doctor, himself a prisoner, sits beside him. "You're lucky," the man says softly. 2 toes gone black, but you'll live. Frostbite, permanent nerve damage, a limp that will follow him for the next 50 years. Thomas stares at the ceiling beams. He thinks of his mother's voice back home in Wisconsin. "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." But lying there, weak, starving, and missing part of his foot, he isn't sure he believes that anymore. He makes a promise to himself. Instead, if he survives this, if he ever sees that man again, he doesn't finish the thought, because he already knows what it means. He closes his eyes, and somewhere outside, Müller's boots crunch through the snow, still pacing, still in control. For now. April 29th, 1945. The camp wakes to a sound no prisoner dares believe is real engines. American engines, the low growl of tanks rolling across wet fields. At 10:43 a.m., the gates of Starling 7A crash open under the weight of the 14th Armored Division. And for the first time in 8 months, Thomas Fitzgerald hears English shouted without fear. "Get the medics in here. Food trucks next. Open every gate." The noise rises like thunder. 76,000 prisoners pour from the barracks, screaming, crying, laughing. Men who haven't smiled in a year hug strangers, rip down fences, fall to their knees in disbelief. The guards scatter like ghosts at daylight. Some throw down their rifles. Some run for the woods. Some strip off their uniforms and blend into the chaos. Werner Müller is one of them. He's been planning this moment for weeks. a stolen civilian coat. Fake papers, a story rehearsed a dozen times. He throws off his uniform, stuffs it under a bunk, and joins a line of prisoners heading for the main gate. He smells of sweat and fear and the dead man whose jacket he's wearing. For a moment, it almost works. Then comes a voice. "Hey you, stop." An American military policeman grabs him by the shoulder. "Show me your hands." Müller hesitates, then extends them. Soft, clean, the hands of a man who hasn't done hard labor. The MP narrows his eyes. "Not starved either. What's your name?" Müller says nothing. The silence answers for him. They find the Wehrmacht papers still in his pocket, his one mistake. He'd meant to burn them. He'd forgotten. Zip ties bite into his wrists. He's thrown into the back of a truck with 24 other captured guards. Rain pelts the open truck bed. The water pools under his knees. They're driven to a makeshift processing yard. German guards on one side, liberated prisoners on the other, separated only by a single run of barbed wire. Across that fence, laughter. Cheers. Behind it, the hollow eyes of men who once held the power. Müller scans the crowd, terrified someone will recognize him. And then he sees him, Thomas Fitzgerald. He's thinner than before, but standing taller somehow. His face gaunt, his frame weak, but his presence unbroken. Even the limp, the one Müller gave him, seems to carry authority now. Their eyes meet. For a second, neither moves. Then Fitzgerald begins walking toward the fence. Every step is deliberate, measured. Müller's stomach twists. He knows what's coming. "Please," he mutters under his breath. "Please." By the time Fitzgerald stops, only a few feet of wire separate them. Rain trickles down both their faces. "I know you," Fitzgerald says quietly. "You left me in the snow 3 hours in December." Müller's throat locks. He nods, barely. "My toes still don't have feeling," Fitzgerald continues. "Doctor says they never will." Silence, just the hiss of rain on mud. Fitzgerald's voice stays calm, almost steady. "I thought about this moment. For 8 months. What I'd do if I ever saw you again." Müller braces himself. "This is it. Identification. Trial. Rope." He blurts out, "Please. I was following orders. I had a sister, had no choice." Fitzgerald's jaw tightens. "You had choices," he says. "Every single day you had choices." He takes one slow breath, then he steps back, turns, and walks away. No shouting, no accusation, no vengeance, just a quiet decision that leaves Müller shaking harder than any beating could. He watches the man limp into the crowd until he disappears, and something inside Müller breaks. Not from fear this time, from shame. Müller expected death. Instead, he got mercy. The Americans didn't beat him, didn't starve him, didn't strip him naked in the cold, as the Germans had done to their captives. They processed him, efficiently, quietly. A medical exam. Clean clothes, a bunk, an actual bunk with a mattress and a blanket that didn't stink of rot. The food shocked him more than the capture. Soup, bread, sometimes even cheese. He hadn't tasted cheese since 1943. He was a war criminal in all but name, and yet his captors treated him like a man. At first, he told himself it was propaganda, some trick for the cameras, a performance for history. But weeks passed. The kindness didn't stop. He gained weight. He slept through the night. No boots on the floorboards, no screams, no fear. And slowly, something far worse than terror began to set in. Realization. Because the Americans weren't just feeding him, they were dismantling everything he'd believed. In July, they gathered the prisoners in the camp mess hall and played newsreels. No commentary, just film. The liberation of Dachau, Bergen-Belsen, Auschwitz, mountains of bodies, survivors who looked like ghosts. Bulldozers pushing corpses into pits because there were too many to bury by hand. The American lieutenant showing the film didn't raise his voice. He just said, "This is what you fought for. This is what was done in your name." Müller couldn't look away. He had heard rumors. Everyone had. But seeing it, broke something permanent. The difference between him, a guard at Stalag 7A, and those men in the footage, the SS at the death camps, wasn't kind, only degree. That night, he couldn't sleep. He thought of Taylor, the young American gunner who had coughed blood, while Müller laughed, 23 years old, dead in the cold because one man said no to mercy. For the first time in years, Müller cried, not from fear, from recognition. He wrote a letter that night, not to anyone, just to himself. I was wrong about everything, about the war, about the Americans, about what it means to be strong. I thought mercy was weakness. I thought cruelty was power. An American prisoner could have destroyed me. He didn't. I don't understand mercy that isn't earned. But maybe that's what winning should look like. He folded the letter and kept it. Through his release, through his return to a home that no longer existed. Because when he finally boarded a train back to Bavaria, he found only ashes. His parents killed in a bombing raid, his sister living in a refugee tent, his city nothing but rubble and silence. And yet, even there, he saw something strange. American trucks unloading food, lumber, medicine. The same flag that had dropped fire on Munich was now delivering bread. He couldn't explain it, but he recognized it. It was the same mercy he'd seen in Captain Thomas Fitzgerald's eyes. Years later, as the Marshall Plan rebuilt Germany brick by brick, Müller began to understand. This was strategy, but also something deeper. Mercy turned into policy. He took work, clearing debris, then on road crews. Hard, honest labor that rebuilt more than just streets. It rebuilt a man. He met a war widow named Anna. They married, had a son. And when that son asked what the war had been like, Müller always gave the same answer: I was cruel when I had power. An American was merciful when he had power. That's why they won. Not because of tanks, because of values. He never said Fitzgerald's name. Some debts, he believed, couldn't be repaid, only honored. But time would test that belief. Because 44 years later, as a wall began to crumble in Berlin, the past would return. And with it, one last chance to say what he never had the courage to send. November 9th, 1989. Müller is 72 years old, retired, living alone in a small Munich apartment. His hands shake now not from fear, but age. On the television, crowds are climbing the Berlin Wall. Young people laughing, crying, hammering away at concrete that once divided a nation. The commentator's voice trembles. The wall is coming down. Müller watches in silence. He thinks of fences, of barbed wire, of another wall he once stood behind 8 months long, a lifetime thick. He thinks of the man on the other side, the American who had every reason to destroy him and didn't. And for the first time in decades, Müller reaches into an old wooden box under his bed, the one that holds everything he's never shown anyone. The unsent letter from 1945, the camp papers, the photograph of his wife and son. He unfolds the yellowed page, reads the words he wrote as a prisoner, then he begins a new letter. To Captain Thomas Fitzgerald, 14th Armored Division, if still alive. Sir, you will not remember me, but I remember you. I was a guard at Stalag 7A, Mossberg. I treated you with cruelty. I made your suffering worse than it needed to be. When our positions reversed, you chose mercy. I have spent 44 years trying to understand why. He writes until dawn, line after line, confession after confession. He writes about the Marshall Plan, about America's choice to rebuild instead of revenge, about how that mercy shaped everything: Germany's democracy, his son's freedom, his own conscience. He ends with, Germany is free tonight because America chose mercy in 1945. Your mercy, the mercy of men like you. He mails it, not knowing if it will ever reach its destination. 3 weeks later, a letter arrives from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The handwriting is shaky but strong. Vera, I remember you. I remember the snow. I remember thinking I would die that day. I remember the smile on your face while I froze. I also remember the fence. When you begged for mercy, I walked away because I wasn't going to become you. My mother taught me, do unto others as you would. Have them do unto you, even especially when they haven't done the same. I don't forgive you. I'm not sure I can. My foot still hurts when it rains. I still see the faces of men who died in that camp. But I believe you've changed. That matters. Thomas Fitzgerald, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They exchanged letters for 6 years. Never often. Just enough. Two men who once shared hate, now sharing humanity. Müller writes about his son, about Germany's rebirth. Fitzgerald writes about his grandchildren, about how strange it feels to grow old when the war still lives inside you. They never meet. Maybe that was best. Some wounds are easier to honor than reopen. Müller dies in 1995. Heart attack. Quick. Peaceful. His granddaughter finds the letters while cleaning his apartment, both the one he sent and the one he never did. She donates them to a museum in Munich, where they rest today, fragile pages, connecting two enemies who chose not to stay that way. And across the ocean. In Milwaukee, Captain Thomas Fitzgerald keeps a copy of the last letter on his nightstand. The paper is creased from years of reading. Below Müller's final line, "Thank you," Fitzgerald adds his own note in pencil. Mercy wins. April 29th, 1945. One man knelt in the mud, expecting a bullet. Another man walked away instead. That single choice made in silence, in rain, between barbed wire and mud, sent ripples through half a century. After the First World War, the Allies crushed Germany. They demanded reparations so severe the economy collapsed. They sowed resentment so deep it birthed Hitler. Revenge created the next war. But after 1945, America chose something radical. Not revenge, rebuilding. They fed the people who had been their enemies. They rebuilt the cities they had bombed. They treated the prisoners who had abused their own as human beings. And the result was not weakness. It was victory of a different kind. 400,000 German prisoners of war were held by America. 99.4% survived. Those men went home and told their families, "The Americans treated us like men." Those stories became the foundation of trust that turned enemies into allies. When the Cold War came, when America needed a partner in the heart of Europe, Germany remembered who had shown them mercy. The Soviets took revenge, and 1 million German captives never returned. America gave mercy and built a democracy that endures. That's how the war was truly won, not just on the battlefield, but in the hearts of the defeated, by soldiers and statesmen who understood something deeper than vengeance, that how you treat your enemies when you win defines what kind of peace you build. Thomas Fitzgerald didn't forgive Müller that day. He didn't need to. Forgiveness is a gift for the past. Mercy is an investment in the future. Fitzgerald's mercy didn't erase what Müller had done, but it changed what Müller became, and what Germany became. That's the power of one quiet decision. No fanfare, no glory. Just restraint, the hardest form of courage. Because revenge is easy. Mercy takes strength, and in the years that followed, mercy built bridges where hatred once stood. Between soldiers, between nations, between two men who proved that humanity could survive even the ugliest war in history. When Vera Müller died, his letters were placed in an archive in Munich. They sit there, still testimony to what happens when mercy meets cruelty and refuses to become it. In a war defined by destruction, mercy built something that lasted: a friendship, a nation, a peace. One moment, one choice. 50 years of ripples. And maybe, if there's a lesson in it all, it's this: that the greatest victories aren't won by the men who pull the trigger, but by the ones who decide not to. So, if your family carries its own stories from that time of battles, of mercy, of survival, share them below. Because history doesn't just live in museums, it lives in choices. And sometimes the smallest mercy can change the world. Next time, the story of the Luftwaffe pilot who escorted a crippled B-17 bomber to safety and met the crew 40 years later. Another war story about enemies who chose humanity when mercy won again.